Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome once again to our weekly media briefing and public health update with Montgomery County Executive Mark Elrich. I'm Lorna Virgilla, Hispanic Public Information Officer, and joining us today is Montgomery County Health Officer Dr. Keisha Davis, Dr. Joan Bridges, who's the Acting Director of the Department of Health and Human Services. Also from the Department of Health and Human Services, Mr. Sean O'Donnell, Program Administrator, Public Health, Emergency Preparedness and Response, and Dr. Earl Stoddard, Assistant Chief Administrative Officer. We have two additional guests today, Jennifer Martin, the President of the Montgomery County Education Association, and Pia Morrison, the President of the SEIU 500. Members of the media, remember to use the chat during the Q&A portion of this presentation. Thank you for joining us, everybody. And I toss it to you, Mr. County Executive. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today. And sorry about the extended technical difficulties here. It was not what I planned. I'm joining you today from Annapolis, where I attended a MACO board meeting and a legislative session a little bit earlier. And as many of you know, yesterday was crossover day, and I'm catching up on a lot of updates here. April 10th is going to be the last day of the session. That's just 3 weeks away. And some notable legislation I want to spotlight is a bill that will give access to health insurance to many more Marylanders, including low-income households, young adults, and immigrants. Another measure will help the state continue to develop strategies to bring down the cost of expensive prescription drugs. And both these members are supported by the Maryland Healthcare for All, which I've been a big supporter of for years. And Vinnie DeMarco has been a really great leader in the public health spectrum. With the new governor and his administration in place, I've seen bipartisan support for many of his and other measures this session. And I hope that collaboration continues and we finish this legislative session strong for the people of Montgomery County and the people of Maryland. Over the last week, there's been a lot of discussion and media attention on the $6.8 billion operating budget that I've proposed. The budget is about choosing to maintain services and the social safety net that we created during the pandemic. Bear with me a second. I need a hand from Scott. My nightmare. My screen is acted up again. But what did you do? No, that's what happened. They popped right onto it. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, sorry about that there. So as I was saying, this budget kind of put us in a position of, what are we going to maintain in terms of services and the social safety net that was created during the pandemic. It also provides record funding for education, affordable housing, public safety, and combating climate change. And these have all been priorities that have been shared by myself and the county council. As the federal government begins to eliminate their COVID funding, there'll be far too many residents who are still going to be in need. And so now is not the time to back away from these services that have been essential to stabilizing families in the communities. And a couple of examples I'd give is, we provided tens of millions of dollars of rent assistance. But even as we were doing that, we basically served people around 50% of area median income, even though lots of people above that lost jobs, have fallen behind on rent. Those needs are still going to be there as COVID wanes. And without the federal money, we're going to be hard pressed to help these folks. At the same time, similar things happened with food. The county always had programs to help provide food to some of our providers, but we're in a situation now where last year we spent $12 million on food, followed the previous year, which we spent about $12 million on food. And one could argue even that didn't meet all the needs. This year we put $6 million in the budget with the understanding that we would go into reserves if need be for the other $6 million if there isn't a tamping down of the need for this as we get closer to the halfway mark of the year. So these are real needs that if they're not funded in this budget, they're going to go unmet in the community. And I believe that, we have to continue our investments in these things, as well as make the investments we need in public safety, economic development, and affordable housing, and of course, education. And, for the last week, a lot of attention has been focused on the 10-cent property tax increase that I proposed. I'm not happy about having to do that, but I think we're faced with a real inflection point in Montgomery County. And I can tell you from talking to the other county executives around the table today, many of them are looking at the same thing, combinations of income tax increases and property tax increases to meet the rising needs of schools. And I'll say this actually crossed over between Democratic and Republican jurisdictions. The impacts of the blueprint for education are arriving, and I think we all knew this was coming, maybe not this soon, but it's certainly here. I'm proposing this increase as a result of the MCPS request for $300 million in additional funding over last year's budget. To put that in context, the largest the county has ever gone over the previous year has been $110 million. So this is almost 3 times the largest amount we've ever gone over before. And I know it's a staggering number, but the vast majority of this money is going to fund the recruitment and retention of new teachers and other essential staff, as well as to address the increase in special education enrollment. Very little of this goes to programs, and I share the concern that a lot of other people have had about the accountability of the school system over programs. And if this were a program-only budget that wasn't focused on trying to keep teacher salaries competitive, I would have looked at their request very differently. But the fact is, they need the money to do the things that they need to do. They need to staff up. We've got staffing shortages in the school. We've got teachers doubling up classes. And it's very hard to recruit when your salaries, have lost competitiveness with surrounding jurisdictions. And, for a long time, we were talking about some thousands of dollars between Montgomery County and the other jurisdictions, with the District of Columbia now increasing starting teacher pay to $75,000. That's a real challenge. I also want to highlight, another factor of teacher pay. It's not just about, increasing it to increase it. We were looking at a project the other day, a housing development that was going to have moderately priced dwelling units in it. And what struck me was that at the moderately priced dwelling unit range, the low priced units would have been out of reach for a starting teacher. A starting teacher would have been thousands of dollars below the income necessary to get into these units. And this is a program, our MPDU program, that was created in 1974 to provide housing for teachers, firefighters, and police officers. And even now, it's not able to do that. So this is a big issue for us. We're no longer the most attractive jurisdiction to teach in, and our schools are suffering as a result. The increase is also needed to fund programs addressing student performance, and I think everybody's seen the results of the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program, where only 31% of MCPS students scored proficient in math and 53% scored proficient in English. These are not good numbers. Nobody should, try to find a way to make it look good. The only thing I can say, though, is that this was similar to what we're seeing across the state and across the country, and when you're thinking about the impacts of COVID. So this is another challenge facing the school system. There's a chart up now, and it's it shows the MCPS student appropriation actual adjustment for actual and adjusted for inflation. And what I want to focus on is at the bottom, the dark blue line is our actual spending. And you can see over the last few years, I've actually increased spending on the schools. At the same time, where we are today on that blue line, look at the dotted blue line, is our spending adjusted for inflation. We are below by almost $3,000 the per pupil spending that we had in 2010. And this is important because, people talk a lot about schools and, what happened to our school system, and it doesn't seem to be as good. We've disinvested from the schools. We've disinvested since the last recession, and we never restored the funding. That peak there was followed by a period when the county had a hard time recovering from the recession. And so we did not go back up like we normally would have and restored funding to previous levels. Instead, we've been on a long, slow decline, and that has not been helpful. And if you look at the chart, the top two lines, the dotted line is the inflation adjusted rate of spending, and the solid line is the gray line is the actual dollars. And this includes state money. And you see the same story repeated. Even with the state money, the school system stays behind where it was in 2010. And, you know, it's hard to say you want the school system of the past and not be willing to invest in the school system the way we did in the past. So this is important, you know, to put some context on this. We have, you know, a good school system, but we need to make sure we make the investments, and this is real. This next chart I'm putting up is enrollment and per pupil total appropriations by jurisdiction. And if you look at the blue dots, you can see that Baltimore County spends more per pupil than we do. Howard County spends more per pupil. Baltimore City spends more per pupil. And Anne Arundel County spends more per pupil. So we rank 5th among these large jurisdictions for per pupil spending. And if we were to pass this tax increase, we would still rank 3rd. And of course, that's before Baltimore City and Anne Arundel County put in their budgets. And I have a belief that you're going to see those numbers coming up as well. So this tax increase would only take us to 3rd in per pupil spending. And it's not like 3rd by a little, it's 3rd by thousands of dollars. So it's an ongoing problem. We've not only not kept pace with ourselves, but we've not kept pace with surrounding jurisdictions. And I want to put the property taxes in context as well. This is a chart of property tax rates and revenue amounts in all of the counties in Maryland. And as you can see, our property tax rate, we see Montgomery County, we are, I guess, 7th. We're 14th, never mind, it's worse than 7th. We are far below the other jurisdiction, many of the other jurisdictions. We're in the middle of the pack. Howard County taxes are $1.25. Frederick taxes are higher than $1. All those jurisdictions are looking at having to increase tax rates. And so we find ourselves, even with this increase, we would still be the 6th lowest in the state, and they would still have Howard County and Prince George's County, 2 of our neighboring counties, higher than our tax rates are. And what's not on here is Fairfax County, but even with this increase, we'd be lower than Fairfax County property taxes on residents. So, and people need to look at Montgomery County in context. Not only haven't we kept pace with our investment in schools with other jurisdictions, but we are not a high tax jurisdiction, and we will not be a high tax jurisdiction even with this tax increase. We'll be higher than we were, but you know, the jurisdictions around us and across the river are pretty much above us. And that's something that I think we need to consider. My proposal to increase our investments is about the future and our children. I asked for this additional 10 cents because I think it's an important step to make Montgomery County a leader in education again. And this money is for education only. None of these cents will wind up going to other parts of the budget. Teachers and other, and we need to be able to attract and retain the best and the brightest among them. On April 11th, the County Council is going to begin public hearings on the budget. This will be the beginning of several weeks where we go through my proposed budget and evaluate the investments that I've recommended will move the county and its residents and businesses forward. I realize that 10 cents seems like a lot of money. On the average home, it's about a $500 increase, or less than $2 a day. It's not a lot of money in the scheme of things. And what I'd remind people is that the $500 a month extra for a typical house would be dwarfed by what happens if the reputation of Montgomery County schools falters. If we're not perceived as the go-to place for education. It will affect property values, and the effect is going to be a lot more than what this tax increase is going to cost people. And I hope people weigh those things as they're thinking about this. The problems with the schools are real, and this is our effort to attempt to address it. I want to note that joining us today is Montgomery County Education Association President Jennifer Martin and SEIU 500 President Pia Morrison. And I want to give them a chance to talk a little bit about what they're seeing in the schools. So I'm going to turn this over to the Jennifer first.
Thank you so much, Mark. Very much appreciate the time to be with you today and with Pia Morrison. We do want to discuss the need for better funding for our county services, especially our public schools. As folks are no doubt aware, our schools across the county, but even here in Montgomery County, are truly in crisis. The effects of the pandemic exposed longstanding problems of underinvestment, and they've exacerbated the stress felt by those of us working on the front lines as educators. Per pupil spending, as Mark pointed out so well with his illustrations, when you adjust for inflation, we're still below where we were in 2009. Meanwhile, the majority of the student body now represents students of color. The demand for English language and special education services have expanded. The number of children living in poverty has grown. Schools are struggling to meet those challenges and address the learning recovery that's required following the pandemic. And we're doing so without the necessary resources. I do want to point out that given the change in the makeup of our student body, we want to make sure that we are saying that our students today are worth the investment that we made back in the day when we were majority white. We want to make sure that we are providing an equitable experience for the children today. So highly qualified, experienced teachers, due to the added stress, have been leaving at an unprecedented rate, been retiring early, or simply leaving the profession for less demanding, better paying, and more respected work. Last year, more than 1,100 teachers and other education professionals like counselors and school psychologists left MCPS, and hundreds of jobs went unfilled in schools this year. The result? Class sizes increase when openings can't be filled. Students requiring special services lack adequate support. Teacher burnout increases as those who remain take on additional duties to cover vacant positions. Today, teachers in Montgomery County are earning 15% less in real dollars than they were 20 years ago. Meanwhile, the cost of college has more than doubled, and educators are expected to earn not only a bachelor's, but also a master's degree, adding to the financial burdens to pursuing teaching as a profession. As a result, schools of education are seeing drastic loss of students choosing education as a major and teaching as a career. So as we emerge from the worst of the havoc that COVID caused, we are, as the county executive says, at an inflection point. I'm a lifelong resident, and I know that we pride ourselves in the excellence of our schools. Residents here have always understood that high-quality public schools drive the livability and prosperity of our county. Even those of us who have no school-age children benefit from the increased safety, the skilled workforce, the new businesses, and the improved property values that excellent schools bring. Public schools are also truly important to a well-functioning democracy and strong communities. The superintendent and board of education have stated they intend to use the increased funding where it is most needed, paying to attract, support, and retain highly effective teachers and other frontline education workers. We know that the path to excellence lies in investing in the people closest to our children. The greatest difference outside the home in driving student achievement is having an excellent teacher in every classroom. The blueprint for Maryland's future, the new state law, is designed to support local school systems in reinvesting in our public schools and lifting the teaching profession. The law will provide additional state money for education, but it also requires increased funding from the county to fulfill the mandates of improving teacher pay and increasing access to programs like early childhood education. The county executive wisely chooses to fund MCPS for the coming school year with a modest 10-cent increase in property taxes. This increased funding will help us attract, support, and retain a dedicated education workforce. It will address the overcrowding and understaffing schools are currently experiencing. It will uphold the reputation of MCPS as a world-class school system, one that attracts businesses and families and supports our economic growth and strengthens the fabric of our communities. The educators of Montgomery County support the county executive's proposal, and we call on the county council to approve this budget and make this necessary investment in our schools. I'll turn it over to Pia now.
Hello, everyone. We know that any county budget is reflective of the values and the morals and what the county deems as the most important things in terms of accomplishing things to help grow this county. The most important investment that any community can make is in its children. And as Jennifer has already stated, our school system is indeed in a crisis. 40 to 50% of the substitute positions are not being filled. There are education support professionals who already are mostly 10-month professionals who are already working multiple jobs and who are themselves Montgomery County residents who are leaving the profession to go to full-time work. They've already dedicated their lives to working and supporting children, whether they're doing the work to sit side by side with students to support their learning, or whether they're doing the infrastructure works to ensure that our schools are safe and clean and ready for staff and students to learn in. Let's also talk about students who are coming to school hungry. As a result of the pandemic, so many of our students are facing food insecurity. During the pandemic, education support professionals were the ones who made sure that over 5 million meals were served during that time. And these are the same professionals who are now having to work other jobs to support themselves and their families. And let's be clear, when adults have to worry about how they're going to provide and feed their families, it's very difficult for them to focus on the work of supporting children when they're worried about supporting their own children. It's so important that this county invest in students in order to continue to attract quality businesses so that students can build a life for themselves and for their families in the future. I completely support SEIU Local 500, completely supports this tax increase. We see this as an inflection point, as Jennifer has already mentioned, and an opportunity for this county to make an investment in the school system that will pay off for this entire community. Thank you so much.
Thank you both for being here. Before I turn it over to questions about this part, I want to reiterate something I said because I think I wasn't clear. Today, Montgomery County ranks 14th in terms of property tax rate. That is, there are 13 counties with higher tax rates than we have. After this is passed, with the new budget, if this is passed, the county will be the 6th highest. There will be 5 counties that are higher than we are. If we pass this, and that's assuming none of the other counties do anything with their taxes, which, like I said, based on my discussion today, is not likely to happen. Everybody's kind of in the same box. So I want to be clear about that. And the other thing I want to say is, having looked at the county's tax structure for a while and looked at what surrounding jurisdictions do, we have a deeper problem than just the school budget. And I wanted to say, and we'll be talking about this more, but if you look at Montgomery County, the District of Columbia does this biannual survey of residential taxes. In DC's survey, Montgomery County is the 2nd lowest residentially taxed place in the region. The only place lower is DC itself. And the reason DC is lower is their property tax is only 85 cents on residential property, but their property tax is $1.85 on commercial property. And Virginia counties have a higher, if you look at commercial property, Montgomery County is the lowest tax jurisdiction in the region for commercial property. When you look at all the taxes the different jurisdictions impose, this will not change our ranking very much, if at all, in that comparison. And it'll certainly have us still below the Virginia counties. So particularly Fairfax. So I just want to make that point before we get into the question part. So I'll turn it back to Lorna for questions.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive, and thank you, Ms. Morrison and Ms. Martin. Members of the media, we're going to open it up now for the Q&A portion of this presentation regarding this particular topic for either of our guests, Ms. Martin or Ms. Morrison, or the County Executive. Use the chat for your request to ask questions, and we'll give it a second or two while you get engaged. Any questions from the members of the media? For Jennifer Martin, President of Montgomery County Education Association, or Pia Morrison, SEIU President. Darcy, Spencer, do you have questions?
Yes, but it's not about the school or the tax increase.
Oh, okay.
We'll
All right.
get there. Yeah.
We'll get there
Okay.
then. Okay. I'll get there then. All right. If we don't
Okay.
have questions, I guess we thank you both for joining us this afternoon. You can remain here or you can move on to the rest of your day. And Mr. County Executive, public health update and other topics.
So next week, there's not going to be a weekly media briefing as I'm going to be in the middle of an international trip representing Montgomery County in Taiwan for a conference on smart cities. I was invited to go and speak to that conference, and we've decided to make this an opportunity to do this as an economic development trip. And so I'm going to be joined by the board chair of Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation, the chair of Montgomery County Council's Economic Committee, the county's chief information officer, and several business leaders representing our technology startup community. We see this as a great opportunity to go to Taiwan and to demonstrate that Montgomery County is both a great place to live and a great place to do business. And we obviously have a lot of Asian companies that have migrated to the United States or opened offices in the United States. We are a good opportunity for people in terms of the size of our market. And they also present an opportunity for some of the businesses that we're bringing along with us. So we're hoping that we'll be able to find some common interests and some economic development opportunities. The Taiwanese leaders actually reached out to us because they had been impressed by what we've accomplished in our climate action plan. And so that was the main focus of what we were originally going to go over there for. My team's been able to set up meetings with leaders from Taipei Medical University and the National Taiwan University, which hosts top-ranked artificial intelligence programs. And I'm sure that our University of Maryland Institute for Health Computing project is going to come up in our conversations. Again, there are probably a lot of synergies between work that they're interested in doing and work that we're going to be doing here in Montgomery County. We're also going to be meeting with dozens of Taiwanese business leaders who've expressed interest in potentially opening an East Coast lab or office or partnering with Montgomery County companies. This is the first international economic trade mission that I'll be taking as county executive. And I'm excited about this opportunity to promote the county and to find potential opportunities and partnerships. On a green note, creating a greener county has been one of my goals since I became county executive. And I know the effort to improve the environment began before that. One of those continuing efforts is that earlier this month, the Tree Montgomery program planted its 10,000th tree. To mark the milestone, Montgomery County Department of Environmental Protection staff celebrated the tremendously successful 9 years of their program with their tree planting contractor, D.A. Dunleavy, at the Lake Marion Community Center in Montgomery Village. Shade trees are going to help our environment in many ways. They're important to wildlife and the process of pollination, and trees soak up water runoff and help reduce the risk of flooding. They're also welcome on our county's many playgrounds, around our parking lots, and in our schoolyards. And these beautiful trees will help us save energy in homes, offices, and schools. So I encourage everyone to visit the treemontgomery.org website and learn more about nominating someplace in Montgomery County where a tree should be added. We are looking for nominations for homes for new trees. Finally, this week, we don't have a lot to share about COVID-19. And as they say, no news is good news. Our community status remains low. Our infection rate is as low as we've seen in the last calendar year, and our hospitalization metrics have also come down significantly. I encourage everyone to stay up to date with their bivalent booster shots. These are the ones that came out last September. And if you haven't gotten one since then, make your appointment. The county is still taking appointments and is handling vaccine and booster clinics weekly. Montgomery County md.gov/COVID-19 is still the resource to find vaccine appointments and stay up to date on the virus. We've seen and continue to see lots of people getting sick with COVID. Fortunately, most of the people I know who've gotten sick with COVID have been vaccinated and have had very mild cases of it. That is the one, great lingering protection from the vaccine is to reduce the severity of these cases. On other health news, this Saturday, our Department of Health and Human Services will partner with Montgomery County Public Schools and Montgomery Goes Purple to hold another event aimed at educating the public on the dangers of fentanyl and preventing drug overdoses. Paint Branch High School in Burtonsville will host the forum starting at 9 a.m. It will feature English and Spanish breakout sessions to help answer as many community questions as possible. And topics for the morning include starting substance abuse conversations, healthy boundaries, tough love, emergency response, and safety at home and at school. And now I'd like to bring up our community health team to share the reports before taking some questions from the media. So I'll turn this over now to you, Lorna, once again.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. Mr. O'Donnell, is it going to be you or Dr. Bridgers or Dr. Davis? Who's going to go first?
Mr. O'Donnell.
Thank you again for this honor. One second. It sometimes gives me different options of how to share my screen. Here we go. So I'll try to be very brief today. Again, as our county executive shared, there's not significant news on the COVID front. Continues to be good news. We are tracking, as always, whether there are other variants of note. We look globally, we look at reports from different countries. Locally, we have not seen any shift in the variants. We are tracking on some new XBB variants and whether they gain footholds in other countries, and that will give us some warning of whether we need to be concerned here. But so far, you can see we've been with the XBB 1.5 in our region for a long time, which is at this point, most people have fairly good immunity to it if they've either had it or they have vaccinations with the bivalent booster that protects against it. Our hospitalization numbers are down. Our emergency departments are showing over the last few weeks lower levels of visits compared to, again, the winter peak. Visits for all types of respiratory illness appear to be stabilized again, as we've reported in previous weeks. Again, we're tracking. We know that later in April, the alternate care site at Tacoma Park is scheduled to close. They have not been taking new patients and slowly moving out other patients. But our overall hospital numbers with COVID diagnoses are trending down. We're also happy to see fewer deaths. We're not happy to see any deaths from COVID, but we're glad to see that it's trending in a better direction now. In March, we've been through much of March, and you can see those numbers are quite a bit lower than our previous months. So again, we share these. We want to emphasize this is, although most people who get COVID are having less severe reactions, it is a deadly virus, particularly for those who are immunocompromised or are older and have other underlying risks. One of those risks is not getting your vaccination. And I know it's a smaller number in our county. We share this data because we continue to collect it from our hospitals and look at it. You can see very stable, lower numbers for those who are vaccinated or boosted, with higher numbers for those who are unvaccinated. And for a little while during the winter, even those who are fully vaccinated had a slightly higher risk for hospitalizations, but nowhere near those who are unvaccinated. So if we still have a chance to reach people out there who haven't gotten that vaccination, you can make an appointment with the county, you can make an appointment with local pharmacies, and we'll get you that vaccination for free. Looking across the United States, we're seeing, again, trends down in mortality related to pneumonia, influenza, and COVID. And again, just to share the mortality data with influenza, we've had only 2 deaths over the last month. So it looks like we are largely through that influenza period. And just to emphasize, again, for folks who would like to get vaccinated or are looking for testing, our website has lots of information about where you can go. We're still providing all of that. We are putting up links. The federal government is starting to promote programs where people can go for no cost COVID testing. Usually that will be covered by your insurance. But if you do not have insurance, the sites that are listed there will not charge you if you qualify for the testing, if you have a reason to be tested, which is, again, if you're symptomatic or have been exposed. And again, we'll promote more of these throughout the county as there's a transition from the emergency services to more regular access to services. That's all the information I have right now from a public health update. I'd like to see if any of my colleagues have anything to add.
Nothing from me, Sean, at this time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Nothing additional.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. Dr. Stoddard, any initial remarks?
No, we take questions now.
Okay, wonderful. So we'll transition to the Q&A portion of this presentation. Darcy Spencer, NBC4, and Kate Ryan, you'll be next. Good afternoon, Darcy.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, just a couple of questions. First of all, talking about fentanyl, any updates you can give on that? We just had the incident yesterday with the Quince Orchard High School student getting revived in a bathroom of a fast food restaurant, and ongoing issues. We are going to be reporting also about the community forum, but just seeing if there's anything else you can add as far as what's happening or how it's being combated or anything like that. It's an open-ended question. And I have another follow-up on a separate item.
Certainly, thank you for that question. So we are working closely with the schools on that incident, building out resources. Again, the fentanyl forum that's happening this weekend, really looking at how we are engaging the community. So we've worked with many of our community partners in terms of Narcan training and how to use that. We do want to commend the students who helped the student, the Quince Orchard High School student. From what we hear, they did what they're supposed to do. They called 911, they alerted the authorities, they gave Narcan, and that is the message that we want, in addition to while we are building resources and getting those out to the community.
Did you find it unusual that, a fellow student actually happened to have that on hand? And I mean, it was obviously great that happened, but, we have students carrying that now, apparently.
We have been seeing students who are really being proactive in terms of helping each other. We are seeing students participate in the Narcan training. They are coming out to the fentanyl forums. And so we want to applaud them for being willing to take that step and support their friend.
Okay, great. And then I just had to ask, just for another reporter, Mr. County Executive, apparently let me make sure I get this right. Tasty Diner suddenly closed today, or I guess it happened. Again, it's not my story, but I'm asking if you know anything about it, and is there anything you can add in that the county may have bought or owned some land in that area? I don't know if you own the land. The county owns the land where the restaurant is, but what can you say on that, sir?
Well, I think it's really unfortunate. I've been going to the Tasty Diner probably almost as long as it existed. It used to be my last stop if I was coming back home at night from going out dancing in DC. I would usually stop at the Tasty and get a cup of coffee and eggs at 2 o'clock in the morning. So I'm well familiar with the place, and I've always enjoyed going there. And it's going to be missed because it's been a really nice institution to have in downtown Silver Spring. I know we've got to know a lot of the people who work there, and it's just unfortunate that it's closing. But nobody's given us any particular reason as why they had to do this.
Okay, so nothing additional about why or the land ownership or anything like that?
No, I will follow up on the land ownership because there was something involved in the county moving the diner from its original location to that land site. So we'll find out what that means. And obviously, if the county owns the land, that is of great interest to me.
Okay, and were there any updated numbers regarding fentanyl and like young people overdosing or Narcan being used? I mean, do you have any updated numbers? I see the COVID numbers, but are you tracking the overdose issue closely like that as well?
There are on the Know the Risks website. You can see those numbers. There is a little bit of a delay, so you're not going to see things that happened yesterday because we wait for things to come from the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. But on the website, you can see those updated numbers that we are tracking.
Thank you.
Thank you, Darcy. Kate Ryan, WTOP. Good afternoon, Kate.
Thank you very much. And I am following up on both those questions. But just to expand a little further on access to things like Narcan for minors, what is the standard practice for that? Are there restrictions on that? And do these kids have access to Narcan through school? Do you know anything about that? And again, are there any restrictions on this?
So in order to have access to Narcan, I mean, anyone can walk up to a fire department and get it. We also offer training that folks can register on the website for that. Our schools have it, but they aren't distributing it to students to take with them. So if there was an emergency within a school, nurse or administrator could administer that.
Gotcha. And to the county officials here on the non-health aspect of this, how helpful is it that we have a policy of if you are someone who is present and helps someone, revive someone from an overdose, that you aren't prosecuted, correct? I mean, my understanding is that the state law?
The Good Samaritan law obviously protects any individual who provides medical assistance to someone who's in sort of a life and death situation from being held criminally accountable for behavior that may have led to that condition. And so obviously it's critically important because every opportunity where we use Narcan, is another opportunity for interventions that aim to address the underlying addiction that person may be experiencing from. And so obviously these opportunities for people to intervene, they should feel comfortable and safe and protected to intervene. And I think as the police department previously said at the first opioid forum that we held, they're not looking to arrest people who are using or are addicted to opioids. They're looking to address the dealers and distributors of these deadly drugs. And so they're not looking either under the Good Samaritan law or even people who are using and who do end up overdosing. Those people are generally not criminally charged unless it's part of unless they're distributing to others. I think that's really the key to focus on. And so you can have confidence that if you save someone's life or you're or you happen to be the person who overdoses, you're not going to face criminal liability if it's part of a use or an addiction, or you're intervening to save the life of a friend or a stranger. And so that people need to understand that protection does exist, and that Montgomery County takes very seriously from law enforcement, from the state's attorney's office, and all the way up the chain in the judicial system, that protecting people's lives is the paramount thing, not criminalizing addiction.
Got it. And Dr. Davis, you suggested, or you hinted at this, these kids did exactly the right thing. How how frequent in touch are you with the school's medical officer? I know the school system has their own officer. Are you constantly in touch with each other? And how much of an anomaly is this incident? Do we know?
So me and Dr. Kapunen are in frequent communication. We talk quite regularly because really there is this partnership between DHHS and the school system. I can't give exact numbers on how often these types of incidents happen in the schools or around the schools. Sometimes we hear about it on social media first. So, but I know that they have been very responsive, and we are partnering with them, especially in terms of the nursing staff that are within schools that are HHS employees. Making sure that all of them are trained, that administrators are trained, and really collaborating on how we have those conversations with the community.
Gotcha. And last question, I promise. Do we have an idea of when it comes to use of fentanyl in particular, is there an age group that is where we see more of it? Is it concentrated in any one age group? Because I think people express surprise that, oh my gosh, you know, teenagers are now getting a hold of this. But do we have a sense of where this is most prevalent?
So when we look at use trends, and actually we were just reviewing the data this morning, it's still overwhelmingly in the 22 to 64-year-old age range. So the young adult to middle-aged adult is where we see most usage. And the trends overall for teenagers are actually decreasing. However, we have seen an uptick in deaths, and part of that is what they're using is more dangerous, more deadly, and addictive.
Got it.
Yeah, I think from Captain Pasterna, who oversees our special narcotics investigations division. What I think he said, the troubling thing that we've seen a transition really since September, October in the investigations, because I would note Montgomery County Police Department is the only police department in the state and region that investigates every overdose, meaning they send a detective out to non-fatal overdoses as well as fatal overdoses, because what they're trying to do is understand the connections to dealers and others, because they believe that if a dealer is dealing that leads to a non-fatal overdose, that isn't the dealer didn't do a good job there either. That easily could have been a fatal overdose, and so they're trying to prevent that next fatal overdose. And what they found is that the behavior that they're seeing in getting cell phone records and other things like that is that they're seeing a shift towards students seeking fentanyl out, as opposed to previous periods where fentanyl may have been in something that they were taking that was maybe they thought it was prescription medication, that it wasn't what they thought it was. They were taking fentanyl, but now they've actually seen a shift where students are actively seeking fentanyl out to consume. And this is obviously a very troubling. They're seeing students in some cases smoking fentanyl. They're seeing just behaviors that reflect a shift in the use patterns of in the young people, that it's not just the number of people using, which, as Dr. Davis said, is actually, we're seeing a decrease in that, but it's the manner in which they're using, and it's the seeking of fentanyl specifically that is increasingly problematic in youth.
Right. What you're saying is, it's again, the young people who are going for it on purpose. It's not the accidental. Understood. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, thank you very much. And again, Tasty Diner, you'll be looking for more information from them on why that move was made. Is that right, Mr. Elrich?
Yes. I'm interested to know why.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kate. Up next, Heather Cortes.
We actually have an update because we've been getting some information. The county does not own the property that Tasty Diner is on. The Tasty Diner does. And our Department of General Service confirms that there are no county developmental activities that involve Tasty Diner. We do have the Cameron Street garage across the street, but nothing's happening there either. We have the Aquatic Center development a block away. Again, that doesn't impact the Tasty Diner either. So we'll continue to look and see if there's any intersection there, but based on all our review of the real property, there's no connection to the county about projects, nothing that would have impacted an imminent decision for the facility, the restaurant to close.
Thank you, Dr. Schroeder, for that update. That works for you, Darcy. Next, Heather Curtis, WMAL. Wamal, it's your turn. Good afternoon, Heather.
Good afternoon. I apologize. I had to step out for a few minutes, so I think I may have missed the Q&A on the tax increase, but I hope you'll still entertain the question. I guess. So I guess, you know, I don't think anyone would argue that teachers are working so hard that they're burnt out, that they, you know, I think everybody wants to help teachers because education is so important. I'm wondering, you know, I know a lot of teachers who are homeowners. Are you concerned at all that this may impact them, since they'll be getting a raise or a bonus, but they'll also be paying more in taxes each year?
Well, if a, you know, a teacher had, say, a modest townhouse of, you know, say $500,000 value, it would cost them $500 a year more. The increases in bonuses are, you know, are going to more than cover, you know, $500 a year. I'd say what I said. I know you weren't on the call here, but I would point out that you run the risk if the county reputationally begins to lose the reputation that our schools are top notch. If we continue, we've got a almost 15-year pattern of disinvestment. If we continue that and we continue to see the struggles where we can't fully staff positions and operate it the way we wish we could operate it, it's going to impact property values, and the impact on property values will dwarf whatever this increase in taxes is. And so I wish, you know, people, as frustrating as this may be, would realize that, you know, when we protect the schools, we are essentially protecting the property values of everybody in this county. It certainly aids when a person wants to refinance or, you know, even sell a house, to know that, you know, people look at us as a place to come to for our schools. I don't want to lose that, because that would have economic consequences. So I think you've got to look at all the balances on this as we weigh this. I know it's not easy, but it is. Our problems in the schools are real.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. I believe Kate Ryan has a follow-up question for the county executive on fiscal issues. Good afternoon again, Kate.
I do, and to the level at which I understand them, yes, I do. So one of the questions I have is on a proposal to raise the recordation tax. Is that something you would favor at this time? Do you think, with you're asking for a 10-cent increase on the property tax rate, do you think this is the time to also raise the recordation tax? And often when I do these, I'm asked by citizens, hey, what about the tax that was supposed to be sunsetted? And I think this dates back to 2010, and that's the energy tax. What's the situation on that?
So the energy tax never got sunsetted because the county never recovered its revenues to where we were. I mean, we were never able to fund the budgets that we had funded prior to that. And so if I were to take the energy tax out, it would have a major implication on everything else in the budget. And again, I'll point out that when you compare our taxes to other jurisdictions, you are not living in a high tax county. You're living in the lowest tax county in the DC region if you're a resident, except for the District of Columbia. And that's only because their commercial property tax dwarfs our property tax on commercial property. So, you know, I think, you know, just one has to, I'd say, be careful what one wishes for here. It would not be, I don't think it would be good. I don't know how we'd manage if we got rid of the energy tax. But this transfer and recordation tax, and the history on this is they're not just raising it for no reason. They gave away a massive giveaway to developers, and for reasons I think were not very good. And they were criticized because the giveaway undercut our ability to raise money for schools and transportation. So when you look at our capital budget, we're coming up short in the capital budget. And so the council promised, and it wasn't this council, it was the previous council, but the previous council promised that they would raise an alternate tax to replace the money that they had lost for schools and transportation. And that promise came and went and nothing got done. There are council members now who recognize the part of the problem we had a tax and we took the tax away. It's handicapped our ability to fund capital projects. and they recognize the need to replace the money. So I wish they had replaced it after they took it away. I wish they had not taken it away in the first place. But this is why they're doing it. And this is something, the council, it's a problem the council created in the funding stack. And this is their effort to try to correct it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kate. I see that Heather Kurtz as a follow-up to Kate's question. Heather?
Hi. So County Executive, you've said that, we have the lowest tax rate in the region. Obviously, you've given the numbers and those numbers do indicate that. I think a lot of people don't have that perception. I'm wondering, can you explain this again? And I'm wondering if you know why that perception is different. Is there something that, people are missing when they're looking at the property taxes?
Yeah, I think because there's a certain group of people, you can imagine who they are, who've kept up this constant drumbeat that Montgomery County is worse than Virginia. You hear this all the time. And it's just factually not true. It's not true on the residential end. It's not true on the commercial end. But that's become the story. And I will say, over the years, it's been repeated by political people. Even after you bring in the data and you show them the comparative tax rates, they continue to tell a story about these horrible tax rates. When you tell people that we are the 14th lowest tax jurisdiction in the state, people look at you like you've got four eyes and horns, because they're like, I don't believe that. I've never heard that. We try to get it out there because we think people need to understand this in context. You can't put our disinvestment in schools in context if you don't see what other jurisdictions that we compete with, like Baltimore County and Howard County do. You can't put our numbers in context without knowing them. There's been I think it's a real disservice by some people to pretend that Montgomery County is a high tax jurisdiction. They focus on, my favorite thing is they focus on the higher tax on corporations in the state of Maryland. What they don't tell you, for example, is that Northern Virginia, has a 3% gross receipts tax on all commercial businesses, including, the retired person doing taxes for a small number of clients in their den at night. They have a stream of tax revenues that comes more from the commercial sector than our tax revenues come. And these folks do not want us paying attention to the difference between our tax structure and Virginia's tax structure, lest residents here realize that we've been sold the bill of goods and we ought to have a more flexible tax structure. I'll just be blunt about it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Heather. Any more questions from members of the media? I do not see any more here on the chat. No more questions? Going once, going twice? All righty then. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.